3. Mabel ran into the lunchroom the next day and skidded to a halt in front of her friends, shouting, "You're not going to believe this." Mabel's best friends Archer, Fernanda, and Suki sat at the lunch table, eyes glued to their phones. Lunchtime was the only time the 8th graders were allowed to have their phones out, so their attention was a precious commodity. Mabel realized they weren't going to pay attention to her unless her announcement was especially good. "We're going to Torture Town," Mabel enticed. And suddenly, she had everyone's attention. "Wait, what?" Suki asked, breathily, in disbelief. She put down her phone and gazed at Mabel with giant onyx eyes behind enormous, round wireframe glasses. She pushed up the puffy sleeves of her peasant dress and rested her chin on them with dreamy anticipation. "Girl, are you crazy?" Archer asked, one eyebrow cocked so high it practically touched the thick ringlet of hair he had so meticulously styled over his dark brown forehead. "I thought tickets were like $1 million. He pushed the ringlet away with multicolored fingernails, but it fell right back down. Fernanda didn't say anything, which was no surprise given her neurodivergence. Because she stared blankly at Mabel with hazel eyes, wore her hair parted in the middle and wrapped around her head in 2 identical braids that formed a perfectly symmetrical crown, and donned an embroidered blue shirt, to Mabel, she looked like a Frida Kahlo painting. "Tickets are only $65, Mabel said, taking a seat beside her friends and acting as though the price were no big deal. "Whatever," Archer huffed, waving away the thought. "Can't afford it either way." He turned a dramatic shoulder to Mabel and gave Suki an eye roll, like, "Can you believe Mabel?" Mabel opened her lunchbox, pulled out her tiffin, and unlocked the metal compartments as she continued to explain. "I got a job, and it pays good. Really good. If I play my cards right, I might be able to pay for all of you." Suki fiddled with the chunky wooden bracelets wrapped around her wrists. "Okay, I'll bite. What job?" Mabel gave her a sly grin as she pulled a lid from one of her containers, allowing the aroma of cinnamon and anise to escape. "It's a babysitting gig." Suki and Archer groaned while Fernanda looked on. "No, you don't understand," Mabel argued. "This isn't just any babysitting job. This one pays $30 an hour." "What?" Archer squeaked, dramatically throwing a hand up to his forehead as though he might faint. "I know, right?" Mabel laughed and began to chow down on her food. Suki twirled the crystal that hung on a chain around her neck. "There's no way," she said in quiet disbelief. "That's more than I make when I do palm readings with my mom at the Lost Key Fall Festival. And our booth is always packed. Line out the door." Mabel smiled with a full mouth and gave Suki a proud nod. Fernanda spoke up. "I thought Mrs. Grace paid you $10 an hour." Mabel chewed and swallowed as everyone leaned forward to get the details. Mabel explained that yes, Mrs. Grace paid $10 an hour, but also Mrs. Grace had fired her, which was completely bogus. But also, none of that mattered because Mabel had made a Facebook page with fake reviews to drum up more business. And she'd hit the jackpot almost immediately. This woman reached out and said she needs someone to watch her kid for 2 hours after school every day until she gets home. And she's willing to pay $30 an hour. Suki mouthed the word, "wow," but Archer folded his arms over his chest and frowned. "Come on, honey. There's gotta be a catch," he argued. "No catch," Mabel swore. "I don't buy it. Is it like a possessed exorcist baby?" No, just a 6-year-old little girl. And she, needs an exorcism. Her head spins around. She projectile vomits pea soup. The mom says she will probably just sit and watch television the whole time. Archer's eyes narrowed into little slits. And where do they live? Mabel paused. She shoveled a huge bite of eggplant and rice into her mouth and spoke around it. "SPITE Lane," she said, unintelligibly, with bits of food flying out of her mouth. "Come again?" Suki asked. Mabel licked her lips, swallowed one more time. Her mouth went dry. "SPITE Lane." "Honey, no!" Archer shouted, as everyone leaned back in surprise. "Mabel, that place is haunted. You can't go there. You know that." Suki admonished Mabel with a wagging finger. Mabel shrugged, as if she had never given it a second thought. "Y'all are making way too big a deal out of this. You know those stories are bogus." "What stories?" Fernanda asked. "Mabel, don't you believe in ghosts?" Suki rubbed her crystal, kissed it, and waved it around in the air. "Not that they require your belief." Mabel rolled her eyes. "Ghosts or no ghosts, that place is cursed AF, Archer said. "It's bad news. No one in their right mind would take a babysitting job there." "Yeah, but for $30 an hour?" Mabel argued. "There's a reason they're paying that much, Mabel. And this close to Halloween." Archer made the sign of the cross over his forehead, chest, and shoulders. Mabel licked her spoon. "Whatever. Y'all are crazy if you think I'm going to turn down that kind of money." "What stories?" Fernanda asked again, slightly louder this time. "Just think about it. 2 hours a day, every day after school. And there are 8 days left before Halloween. That's $480. Archer chewed the inside of his cheek as Suki stared into space, calculating. "Look," Mabel continued. "Let's say it sucks, and I hate it, and the kid is a demon or whatever. I can just babysit for the 8 days, get my money, take you all to Torture Town, and never go back. Right?" Mabel opened one of the other metal containers, finding 2 dough balls floating in a sticky, sweet brown syrup. She popped one in her mouth and chewed. "If my math is correct, we only need $260 to buy 4 $65 tickets to Torture Town," said Archer. "Your math is correct," Fernanda agreed. "Right. So what do you need all that money for, Mabel?" Mabel licked her fingers and leaned over the table, lowering her voice. "Well, the age limit says 16 and up, so we're going to need fake IDs." "Fake IDs?" Suki screamed. "Shh, jeez, don't blow it." Mabel hushed her, and she looked over their shoulders to make sure no one was listening. "They can get pretty expensive, but I did some research, and we can save a little money if Fernanda makes them for us. The extra money should cover supplies." Without hesitation, Fernanda picked up her phone and began to search how to make fake IDs. "Come on, y'all. Just imagine what we could do with fake IDs," Mabel enticed. "Torture Town is just the beginning. Girl, if you think anyone will believe we're 16, Archer put his head in his hands and shook it. "It's worth a try," Mabel argued. "Suki is really good with makeup." Suki shot them a coy smile with pink blushed cheeks that rounded like apples and straight white teeth that glistened behind hot pink lip gloss. "It's true. I'm a great makeup artist, But don't forget, my eyelashes are real, okay? You'll need falsies all the way. And Archer, you have killer fashion sense. Archer frowned again, but said, "Thank you. Come on, ignore the stupid fake stories about Spite Lane, and let's get scared for real at Torture Town." "What stories?" Fernanda demanded one last time as she set down her phone. "Also, Mabel, you owe me $142.60. "What?" "I ordered supplies to make the IDs." Mabel, Archer, and Suki looked at each other in disbelief. "Already?" Suki asked. "You have a credit card?" Mabel pressed. "My parents gave me a savings account with a debit card attached. For my birthday," Fernanda explained plainly. "It has a small stipend for my inventions." "Well, well," Mabel said. "That could come in handy. I'll make the IDs, but you still haven't told me. What stories?" Before Lost Key had become the bustling resort town Mabel and her friends knew it to be, it had been but a slip of sand that washed in and out of the estuary that divided Florida and Alabama. In the early part of the 20th century, 100 years before Mabel and her friends were born, few people dared build homes on that fickle ground. Sure, the Savage family had taken its chances, as had the McCraes, but the last bits of driftwood that had once been called Beldame had finally washed away when Hurricane Ricardo rolled through in the fall of 2022. No architecture was left of that era, except for a single strip of Victorian homes built by a developer named Gabriel Spitzer. After his home in nearby Lillian was lost to the Great Flood of 1919, he set out to try again. He took every penny he had left and put it into a sprawling estate on a pitch of mud on the northern side of Lost Key. His construction crew told him he was crazy. When it rained, the ground turned to quicksand. But Spitzer was determined to persevere. He told them to dig out the sand during the storms and had large fishing trawlers haul in the stones that were used to build the ground back up again, essentially creating an island on top of the key. Spitzer's Victorian mansion was built up so high on that pillar of stones and mud that, even when the floods and hurricanes railed against it, the building prevailed. The eaves were tall and curved to redirect the angry wind, and the windows were narrow with heavy shutters that protected the thick, wavy panes of glass. When it easily weathered the squall of 1922, which leveled most of the small towns around Pensacola and Mobile, families who had lost it all to the storm begged Spitzer to build something just as sturdy for them. And so, the development of the Spitzer neighborhood took shape. By the end of 1923, there were 15 houses from gate to forest, each unique in design, but built to the same exacting standards. To this day, the Spitzer mansion and the remaining houses stand, though they all show signs of wear and tear. The sign at the old iron gate, worn and never maintained, is now missing a few letters and reads as Spite Lane. This surprises no one, as it is well believed across Lost Key that the entire neighborhood, once a bastion of modernity and strength, is violently haunted. Some say Spitzer himself was the culprit, a strange man who some thought worshipped the devil. He was a recluse in his later years. He deeded the house to his estranged great-grandchildren when he died, and as far as anyone knows, it has remained empty ever since. Although, some say you can still catch a glimpse of Gabriel Spitzer in a suit and tie, going for his nightly walk under the one street lamp in service, if you stay up late enough. Others say the land was inhabited by a demonic, shape-shifting river monster since long before Spitzer arrived. And it was simply poor luck that the man thought he could claim what has always been and always will be the territory of someone or something else. But the predominant legend has it that a group of teens decided to hold a seance in one of the houses for Halloween and unwittingly opened a gate between the dimensions, allowing an entity through that has not since left. No one from Lost Key, no one with any familiarity with these stories would ever willingly live on Spite Lane. But newcomers, enticed by the home's ample square footage and impossible-to-beat prices, still come and go with regularity. Every once in a while, someone local and desperate seems to think they are immune to the darkness that resides there, and they take a job at one of the homes, or date one of the residents, or run an errand. Just a quick one. Down the lane. It never ends well. So it stands to reason that no babysitter in her right mind would ever take a job minding any of the Spite Lane children. No babysitter, except for Mabel Mandal. So, now do you see why Mabel can't take this dumb job? Archer said, as he finished up his tale. Fernanda murmured, considering what she'd just been told. Then she nodded with certainty. Yeah, sounds like a bad idea. I wouldn't do it if I were you, Mabel. Suki nodded conspiratorially. You gotta be kidding me, Mabel spat, as she gawked at Fernanda. You believe in ghosts? No, Fernanda said, without emotion. I'm sure there's a logical explanation. Could just be confirmation bias. What's that? Suki asked. When you fit an explanation to meet your pre-existing beliefs, Fernanda explained. Right? Mabel agreed. Believing is seeing, or whatever. So the rumors are probably not due to paranormal events, Fernanda explained. But it could be a serial killer. Mabel clapped her mouth shut and looked at Fernanda with wide eyes. Yeah, Fernanda said distantly. Now that I think about it, definitely sounds like a serial killer. The bell to end lunch rang, and the group of friends all jumped in their seats. Thanks, Mabel said sarcastically, as she grabbed her things and stood to leave the table. But serial killer or not, I'm definitely taking that babysitting job.